Today on Comicstorian, mutant kind is about to be eradicated. Over here at Comicstorian, we take comic books, we cut them down, cutting out the B-plots, the extra stuff, and just tell you the bare bones of what is going on. I read it to you as an audio drama, giving you a way to enjoy it, but leaving enough out that it will allow you to go buy the books yourself if you want to add them to your collection. We make alterations to the panels, text, and images, and all of the art is owned by its respective companies. Now let's get into the actual storyline. To understand where we are, you need to understand where mutant kind is at this point. They have separated themselves from the rest of the world on an island known as Krakoa, where they have their own religion, their own laws, and their own ability to revive their own dead. Right now, if a mutant dies, they will be reborn in an egg on Krakoa. So the mutants conquered life and death. But as this story is about to begin, you're going to discover that the Russians have found a way to send Omega Red through time. And they're using this technology to try and kill Professor X before he can do anything else. So Jean Grey is now tapping into Wolverine's mind and sending his mind through time to try and prevent things. While this is going on, we're also going to find out what's happening with Moira McTaggart. Now she's important because her mutant ability was the ability to die and restart time. So after thousands of lives, she is the one that created the future that the mutants are living in right now. She created a world where the mutants can live forever on Krakoa, but by doing so, her own powers were removed for her, and she was exiled from mutant kind. So she has been on the run ever since giving them this perfect future. So I know that all sounds confusing, but it'll all start to make sense as we get into the storyline. Wolverine's mind is traveling through time to try and save Professor X, and Moira McTaggart is trying to figure out how to fix all the problems that she has created. Here we go. It will make sense as the story goes. Wolverine looks at his old watch as the sun sets over Krakoa, thinking to himself that this may be broken, but that's why he's using it. A digital clock makes sense. It tells the lie of a single moment that doesn't exist, and it's already gone when you look away. But a proper watch lets you see the possibility of all time. That's the truth that he knows for more than a century of living. Time is sideways, time is forwards, time is backwards, and it's upside down. But that's just time. And then there's a voice asking if he's ready, and Wolverine clenches his hand, looking back at Professor X. Later, at another time, a woman sits on her bed, giving birth as her handmaid tells her that it's going to be okay. Breathe. It's almost time, Mrs. Xavier. Downstairs, Brian Xavier sits by the fire, hearing his wife going through labor, and tells the butler that he needs some fresh air. Yeah, fresh air. As he steps outside onto the balcony, he hears the trimming of bushes, and he asks, "Is that Bowers? Why is the gardener here so late?" He calls out, but instead of answering with words, Bowers turns, throwing the trimmers. Before they can land in Brian's head, Wolverine tackles him to the ground, telling him to get inside and grab a gun if he has one. Brian nods, stumbling back into the house, and when Wolverine looks over, he sees Bowers with an Omega stamp on his forehead. The Omega Red possessed gardener climbs onto the ledge, but before Wolverine can attack, a bone tendril whips out, grabbing him by the leg, throwing him to the side. Back inside, the handmaid delivers the first child, but she isn't crying. She isn't even breathing. Back outside, Bowers tells Wolverine that there's no end, just endless beginnings, and he has no way of stopping this. Wolverine pops his bone claws. "Just try me." He charges in, throwing himself at the gardener, but just as he gets ready to cut out his throat, the possession fades and Bauer asks what is happening. Inside, Brian grabs his gun and he runs upstairs to his wife, but when he is called back, the possession has shifted from the gardener to the butler. The butler lifts his gun, but Brian turns in time to see him, and he blasts him with his shotgun. In the master bedroom, the handmaid says that they will mourn for the child later, but Sharon says that her name was going to be Cassandra. The handmaid nods, stating that they will mourn Cassandra later. They need to deliver the second baby. But at that moment, Brian bursts in, locking the door as his wife asks him what is wrong. He tells her not to worry. He'll protect her. The handmaid then says to listen to him. "Don't worry. We have to concentrate on the child." Brian looks out the window as he sees the reflection of someone strangling Sharon, and he turns back shouting to let her go. The possessed handmaid lashes out, grabbing the gun, bashing Brian with it, and goes back to Sharon, but that's when there's a noise. Wolverine breaks through the wall. The handmaid grabs Wolverine by the waist, throwing him into the ceiling, but Wolverine struggles to claw his way towards the possessed. She tells him to go ahead, stab her. She's just a poor, innocent bystander after all. Wolverine pauses, and she whips into the wall again, laughing. The old Logan wouldn't hesitate. You aren't even the same man anymore. Krakoa made you weak. Wolverine grabs a chair, breaking it over the woman's head, and retracts one of his claws, slamming his fist into her throat, pinning her to the wall. He yells to get out of her, but the woman tells him to kill her or she'll kill him. That's the only way. But then there's the sound of a gun being loaded. Wolverine looks back and Sharon is standing there holding the second baby, stating that she doesn't know who they are or what kind of monsters they are, but they will get the hell away from her baby. Meanwhile, in the present day in Moscow, the Russian military sits poised around a Krakoan portal when suddenly it begins to stir. Everyone points their guns as Omega Red steps out and he asks, "Is this how you welcome a comrade?" One of the soldiers asks if he is with them, and another says, no, he's with the mutants. Omega Red grabs the man by the throat, throwing him. "I want to see the one in charge. Where is he?" A voice then calls out that is enough, and everything fades to black. Omega Red looks up, and Sage says, "Welcome to Russia. Arkady, welcome home." Back in our tale in the past, Wolverine keeps the handmaid against the wall, turning back, stating, "Look, Mrs. Xavier, Sharon, don't." She pulls the trigger, blowing Wolverine away, freeing the handmaid. She lunges forward, grabbing Sharon by the neck, telling her to give her the child and she can live. But Brian throws himself on the handmaid, digging his fingers into her eyes, yelling, "Get away from my family!" As the two fight, the baby screams and Wolverine picks him up, cutting the umbilical cord. The handmaid turns back, carrying the child, and runs at him, and as she dives at him, Wolverine steps aside, and she goes flying out the window. Wolverine looks down at the baby and smiles. "Shh, shh. It's all right, Chuck. I got you." But then there's a shock, and everything goes to white with Wolverine blinking, and he finds himself somewhere else. Before he even has a chance to look at the gear he's wearing, Sabretooth tackles into him, telling him, "You're dead, you stupid runt!" Except Sabretooth isn't trying to kill him. He's trying to save him from the oncoming fire. Wolverine looks around at the war zone, telling him, I don't remember this." And a voice tells him that he's in Colombia. He looks over to see a shade of Jean Grey, telling him that his target is 25 miles north by southwest of here. He has to save Xavier. The clock is ticking. Now we go to Deaths of Wolverine, issue number 1. Moira McTaggart was supposed to be the savior of Charles and Eric. But after so many lifetimes of protecting them, they would in turn protect her. But they lied. Xavier's dream is now her nightmare. Moira McTaggart is depowered, exiled, and erased from history. She has no choice but to accept it and just run. Even after running through the cipher, she can still feel Mystique's hot breath on the back of her neck. After stumbling out of the portal in Scotland, Moira waves down the local farmer passing by with a truck. He asks if he can help her, and instead of answering with words, she punches him, taking his truck and smashing the cipher to block anyone from following her. Later at Kinross Estate, Moira laughs to herself, stating that there is a certain poetry about it really, sending her back here, where things began and where her end is only beginning. Everything about who she used to be and where she's going, and how it's soon to be gone. But she isn't going to just sit back and let them take a blade to her throat. Moira begins to cough when she looks at the blood in her hands, and she stares, thinking that she never had to fear death before. She was always reborn. Maybe it's time for that to change. A few days later, back at Krakoa, Black Tom goes to enjoy himself with a drink when he notices that there is something off about his drink. It's moving. At that moment, there's a shudder across the land, which to the people of Krakoa is normal. Krakoa is always changing. But this change, there is something wrong, something deep in the roots and the nerves. And as Black Tom tries to determine the source, the land splits open and something grows before him. Back with Moira, she goes to visit Dr. Jane Foster just to see how bad things are. And just as she guessed, Jane has stage 4 cancer. Moira says that Krakoa has petals, right? And Jane says that they both know that getting those petals that will cure anything is nearly impossible. And even then, they won't cure cancer. Moira shouts that she knows that, but it can slow down your cancer. All you need right now is some time. As Moira falls to her knees, Jane kneels with her, asking if she's going to explain what's going on, and Moira tells her that she can't. Jane says that she came here instead of going to them. Why? Moira gets up, stating that they already think that she is dead, and some might not be too happy that she's still alive. Just forget about all of it, okay? She can't really explain things better than that, and she is not one of them anymore. Suddenly there's a knock at the door, and a nurse pokes in, telling Jane that she's needed back in the morgue. Apparently there's some sort of emergency. Jane tells Moira that she'll be back in a few, but as she leaves, the nurse's skin begins to turn blue, revealing it to be Mystique as she begins to make her way towards Moira. Moira asks whatever happened to never killing a human, and Mystique laughs, telling her to listen carefully. Calling herself a human? Just like that? You're no longer a mutant, Moira? Moira grabs her bed and throws it into Mystique, yelling that she created all of this. Their disgustingly perfect Krakoan society only exists because of her. Her work. Her lives. Moira built this world. And this is how you thank me, Mystique? Mystique yells that if she ever really believed that, she'd want this too. But before Mystique could attack, the doors are blown off the hinges, pinning Mystique to the ground. Jane, in her Valkyrie form, tells Moira to go, breaking open the window for her to escape. Mystique grabs her gun and begins to fire, yelling to stay out of this, but Moira manages to get away just in time. Back over at Krakoa, Black Tom takes a closer look at the growth and sees that it's a sort of egg. It suddenly splits apart and a person begins to walk out of it. And Black Tom looks at the figure, asking, what are they doing here? What is this all about? There's a schnick. Black Tom is struck down as the clawed shadow walks away. Later in Newark, Moira tries to change up her look to try and throw everyone off of her trail to prevent those from trying to murder the mother of all of the mutants right now. And she notices an unusual amount of men in suits floating around. They have earpieces, runner's legs, and bodybuilder torsos, not to mention the bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. Why are there so many CIA agents here? Just then, one of the men grabs Moira, asking if she would mind taking a walk with them, and she snaps back her arm, taking the agent's gun. She runs off trying to make an escape, stealing a motorcycle, telling herself that the CIA wants her in a cell and the mutants want her in a grave. Between them and the cancer that is eating its way through her body, her chances of surviving all of this aren't looking great. She can't reset time anymore. She can't be reborn anymore. If she dies now, it's all over. But if there's one thing that she's learned from all of her lives, it's that dying doesn't agree with her. Meanwhile, back in Krakoa, in the cradle, Professor X and Jean Grey watch over Wolverine when Jean suddenly feels someone. She looks over, stating that it's impossible. And Professor X asks, what is it? And she calls out to the shadowy being, asking, Logan? I don't understand, is that you? And the Shade tells her, I'm no one. I was never here. Cutting over to the Lives of Wolverine, issue 2. Wolverine has for all time left his mark on the world. But now he's going to put a good dent into the universe, or at least die trying. After clawing his way out of the underground fight club in northern Canada, Wolverine steps out into the blizzard and a shadow of Jean tells him that he's starting to look a little skinny. Anyway, he's 50 miles northwest of here. The wind chill is -30, and the way there is an obstacle course of ice hammocks and crevasses. Wolverine rides off. Good thing that I'm in the body of an idiot teenager that thinks that he's invincible. The world turns white and Wolverine finds himself back in Japan with his wife Itsu. Jean clears her throat and Wolverine tells her, just one more minute. Please, Jean. However, Wolverine isn't going to relive his past. He's here to protect the life of Charles Xavier from a mysteriously time-hopping Omega Red. The world changes again and Wolverine finds himself in Colombia fighting alongside Sabretooth and Maverick in some form of guerrilla warfare. But this place doesn't look familiar. And while Sabretooth and Maverick are fighting, Wolverine pulls back. Jean guides him through the forest, telling him that Charles is here as a part of a larger coalition, and they hope to save the Amazon rainforest and the indigenous cultures that are being extinguished by deforestation. But as they come up to a small village, Wolverine stops and Jean asks him what is wrong. Wolverine says that he doesn't remember it at first, but he remembers it now. Seeing the lab, it busted open a lock in his brain, and after they destroy it, they're gonna go after the surrounding villages as well. Hundreds of villagers will be mowed down, mass graves, burn piles. It was to send a message. Fear America more than you fear the cartel. Jean stops him though, informing him that while he is in the past, he cannot stop Team X, Wolverine's original team, and save Xavier from the time-hopping Omega Red. He has to save Xavier. Wolverine tries to tell her, "You don't understand. This is the worst version of myself, the one that I wish I could take back, correct the unforgivable things, and I'm going to fix it." But again, the world changes. This time, it's on Omega Red though, not Wolverine. In the not-so-distant past, Wolverine and Domino are leading it up, bringing Omega Red in for a trial run, one where they need to find and capture Maxim Ivanov. But while Omega Red went looking for the target, someone else found him. Omega Red heard the voice call out to him, and then suddenly, with the pull of his hair and a sharp pain in his chest, he turns off the surveillance that has been put inside of him after he was killed, and brought back to life without his knowledge. Omega Red says, "I don't!" But Sage tells him that he might not believe him, but he will. And then he will come back to Russia, where he belongs. Soon, Sage fades away into smoke, disappearing from Omega Red's eyes, and Wolverine calls out to fall back, because Maxim isn't here. But back in the time of Columbia, going over back to Wolverine's time-traveling adventures, he makes his way back with Sabretooth and Maverick, with Maverick telling him, "See, he probably just had to drop a deuce." Without warning, Wolverine shoots Maverick in the leg and then opens fire on Sabretooth, altering the flow of time itself. The two scuffle, with Sabretooth asking, "What are you doing?" Wolverine pops his claws, pulling the pin on a grenade, blowing the two of them back. Maverick coughs. "I don't get it. We were a team." And Wolverine tells him, "You're better than this. You've always been a survivor. Get out of the game while there's still time." And as Wolverine leaves, Sabretooth radios back to the professor, telling him that the mission has gone to hell, and Wolverine went AWOL. The professor responds, asking if they need an extraction, but Sabretooth tells him, "No, I'm just telling you. I'm gonna go kill Wolverine." But time shifts again, and Wolverine finds himself fighting against a possessed wife of his, Itsu. Omega Red has been tainting the past, appearing in places throughout time in an attempt to kill Charles Xavier. But Omega Red died and was brought back to life without his knowledge of what was done to him during the time in between, who had his body, who manipulated him. And as Wolverine is battling with his own wife, recalling something Jean told him, she told him that there would be consequences for his time-hopping adventure. And Wolverine's unborn son is that consequence. Dakin. As he slashes, he tells himself that he can't, but he also cannot. Meanwhile, back over with Deaths of Wolverine #2. In the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, Moira McTaggart is tightening her hoodie as she coughs, placing an energy drink and caffeine pills on the counter of the corner store. The cashier says that she must be in for a long night. And Moira tells him to get her one of those burner phones. The man tries to ring things up, stating that he saw the license plate. "Pennsylvania, huh? Long way from home? Sorry to be so chatty. Doubt I'll see anyone until I clock out at 5. She grabs her gun, pointing it at the man. Good. After tying up the man and taking a bit of the cash from the drawer, Moira goes back to her car, telling Jane Foster. Before Jane could even really respond to the fact that Moira just robbed a gas station, Moira tells her not to say her name. Jane says that she's glad to hear her voice, and wondered whether or not they caught up. Moira says that she wanted to apologize for dragging her into this entire mess. She just hopes that everything is okay back at the hospital. Jane tells her not to worry about that, but listen. There's some follow-up tests from her samples. The cancer that Moira has is unlike anything that she has seen. There's what appears to be a floronic matter woven into it. Moira says the No Place biome. They did this to her. She needs to go now. Thank you again, Jane. Jane asks what is she going to do, but before Jane could even finish that sentence, the phone was out the window of the speeding car. Moira then goes to a motel where she thinks back on everything. This wasn't supposed to be how things were going to turn out. It was her dream too. It was her dream as much as Xavier's. She's gone from being the secret weapon that they protected to the curse that they want to erase. Mystique found her and she's going to find her again. She has a pretty good guess of how they're tracking her. But while Moira's trying to figure it out, somebody is at the counter looking for her. Moira begins to set up everything in the bathroom. First, she plugs in an iron, pouring several bottles of iodine in the tub, and then sits in it drinking her whiskey before taking a deep breath. She takes out a large knife and begins to heat it up. And once it's ready, she slams it into the black arm, pushing it in until it falls off. Trying not to scream, she grabs the iron, pushing it against her open wound to cauterize it. Outside, Mystique grabs a few towels, and the man at the counter screams for her to take the knife out. But Mystique walks by, transforming into him. She goes to Moira's room, knocking on the door, explaining that she brought clean towels. But with no answer, she kicks in the door, opening fire, finding nothing. She pulls back the sheets to find the severed arm. And then hears a quiet beeping. But before Mystique has a chance to see, the bomb under the bed goes off. Meanwhile, back on Krakoa, Forge works away in his lab when Jean telekinetically asks, what can he tell her about the pod that Black Tom found? Any progress on that? And Forge says that he's still trying to crack the analytics, but there's one thing. In the same way that you can examine stone or ice by coring it, you can do the same thing with mature plants, like trees. Well, the thing is, it's Krakoan, and it's old as all hell. The timelines just don't match up. Xavier asks, what is he saying? And Forge tells him that the thing appears to be 1,000 years older than the island itself. The egg doesn't belong here. Back over at the motel, the fire begins to spread as the police and the fire crews arrive, but walking up in the shadows is the Wolverine in black. He looks at one of the officers scanning him, and the man tells him to stand back, but Wolverine grabs that man, pushing him away, beginning to walk into the fire. He looks down at the burning body, and the scan tells him Phalanx signal located. Warlock identified. He stomps on the skull and begins to walk out as his body is burned away, but he moves as if he's unaffected by the flames. He goes into the office, popping a single claw, jacking into the computer, beginning to scan. Images begin to appear of one man in particular, and then the search comes back with a location, Mountain View, California. The other officers rush in, telling him that he just assaulted a police officer and now he's trespassing on a crime scene. But Wolverine turns back, telling them not to interfere, as one of the officers fires his taser. You were warned. He sends back the shot, taking out the officer. And then meanwhile, on a hill overlooking the motel, Moira watches through the scope of a rifle, stating that she has lived and died and lived, over and over again. The mutants always met their end. They wanted this time to be different, and they got their wish. She has seen the future. She just didn't think it would happen so fast. Now back over with The Lives of Wolverine, issue number 3. With the help of Jean Grey and Charles Xavier, Wolverine has been living through some of his past lives in an attempt to stop a time-traveling Omega Red from killing Charles Xavier and his ancestors. In the year of 1900, Benedict Xavier found his ship stranded in the north while also dealing with a mutinous crew. However, the mutiny wasn't just because of their situation, it's because Omega Red was jumping from body to body, forcing Benedict to act. As Charles' ancestor fought to stay alive, a young Wolverine rushed to help, but was stopped just short as the ice began to crack all around him. Through the frozen waters, a giant white whale emerged, threatening to swallow Benedict Xavier, leaving Wolverine with little time to even act. However, this isn't the only battle that Wolverine finds himself in today. In a post-war era Japan, where Wolverine thought he could quietly live with his wife Itsu, Omega Red's rampage extends its reach to Wolverine's personal life. As Itsu is still carrying the unborn son Daken, Wolverine begs her to snap out of it, to stop fighting him. I don't want to kill you! But Omega Red says before he goes hunting for Xavier, he was going to remove Wolverine from the equation. Jean, I need your help! I need to know what happens to Daken! Wolverine is then grabbed and held underwater as Jean tells him that she doesn't know. They don't have enough time to even determine what would happen or if Daken would be erased if he fought against his ex-wife. While struggling to breathe, Wolverine notices blood spilling into the water. Blood he didn't draw. He breaks from the bone tendrils calling for Itsu, and he sees her held in the air, skewered by Romulus's claws. Romulus laughs as he doesn't know what he's interrupting, but it can't be a surprise to see him again. But the time shifts again, and Wolverine is now running through the jungles of Colombia with Sabretooth close behind him. Wolverine yells that he doesn't have time for this, he needs to find him. Focusing on slowing Sabretooth down, Wolverine takes aim at a beehive, shooting it so that the hive lands directly on Sabretooth's head, angering the bees enough so that they stop Sabretooth. Back over in the 1900s, Benedict is struggling to free himself as he tries to light a barrel of gunpowder on fire to throw in the whale's mouth. But as he's lifted, Wolverine slices through the bone tendrils, dropping Benedict back onto the boat as he grabs a flaming barrel, throwing it into the wolf's mouth. Back in the Japan story arc, Wolverine is slowly losing himself to his rage. And this isn't supposed to happen. I'm not even supposed to be here. I just need to hurt Romulus enough so that he runs away, beat him enough so that he never returns. But then again, later he'll send the Winter Soldier to do his dirty work. Wolverine then hears Itsu calling out to him, but it's not the strained, twisted voice of Omega Red taking over her body. No, it is the unpossessed, actual wife of Wolverine. With both Charles Xavier's ancestor's life and his wife's life at stake, it's time to focus on the Charles in Colombia. Wolverine claws his way through the thick Amazon, where that Charles is being interviewed. But Jean scans the area, stating that something is wrong. He's supposed to be here. They followed him to this exact place. Omega Red has to be here. As Wolverine begins to slow down, he tells Jean that Omega Red is here. But it's me that he should be afraid of. And at that moment, Omega Red takes control of Wolverine's body. But with Wolverine spread across 3 time periods right now, we go back to the Deaths of Wolverine issue number 3 to see what is happening with Moira. With tensions heightened at the appearance of a cybernetically enhanced Omega Wolverine, Laura and Gabby are still new at understanding the situation. While returning to Krakoa, Laura hears a voice calling out to her, and just as it does, her instincts take over, and she immediately lunges towards the source. As she jumps through the projection of Professor X, he says that he should have known better than to sneak up on any of them. He then touches Laura's forehead to show her the situation regarding this Omega Wolverine. Laura says that it looks like Logan, but it's not him, is it? Regardless, I sense that I would be the second in line for this job. Why don't you just send the real Logan? Professor X tells her that he is currently indisposed. Please, I will mentally offload an intel briefing so that you can prepare. But you must understand, I can only tell you so much. Everything hangs in the balance, and who better to send in pursuit of a Wolverine than a Wolverine? At that moment, Gabby jumps down ready to fight. I think you meant to say Wolverines! Meanwhile, across the globe, at the Epiphany campus in Mountain View, California, Arnab Chakladar prepares to unveil his new line of tech products to the world when Dolores Ramirez of the CIA stops him before going on to take the stage. She tells him that she would like him to come with them. They've recently received a tip that he is being targeted. Arnab waves her off, telling him that he thinks not. He won't be canceling the event when he's seconds away from going on stage. But while they're trying to convince him to leave, a car crashes through the entrance, and more agents surround it, with the door opening, revealing the Omega Wolverine. Alarms begin to blare in the theater, and Arnab is directed to leave as they attempt to get him to safety. But as he's making his way to the helipad, Omega Wolverine claws his way through the security, but then just barely misses the helicopter. But what no one sees is that the helicopter has a stowaway. Moira has managed to climb aboard the chopper undetected by Arnab's staff. After the short flight, Arnab arrives at his safe house in the north of San Francisco when Moira attacks. She places a gun to the back of his head, stating that she is sorry that his launch was ruined. But what she's about to tell him is going to more than make up for it. As the two head inside of the bunker, Arnab asks what does she want? Money? He has all the money in the world. Moira tells him that she doesn't want money, she wants to save their lives. Put on the news and it'll all make sense. Hesitantly, Arnab does this, and there are reports of an attack by the Omega Wolverine at the Epiphany campus. Moira tells him that they are here to kill him and others because of what they're going to do together. The fact that he is being hunted proves that it's going to work. Meanwhile, back at Mountain View, the Omega Wolverine continues to tear through the CIA agents when Laura and Gabby attack him, asking, "Who are you?" "Laura, if I have to kill you, I will." She asks, how does he know who she is? And Laura pushes her and Gabby away when a third voice calls out to Wolverine, and Daken steps out. "Hey, old man." The Omega Wolverine looks over his shoulder, and Daken attacks him, telling him that they convinced him to come because they said that this would be therapeutic, to hunt down the worthless version of some wannabe version of the old man. But the way that he fights, the way that you speak, the way that you smell, you're really him, aren't you? Wolverine steps back, retracting his claws, waiting for a moment, and then says that none of them make it. He knows how each of them are going to die. At that moment, Wolverine falls to his knees, grabbing one of the wounds that he has suffered, and Gabby asks what is wrong with him. Daken tells her that he's hurt, but Laura looks a little closer at the wound and sees cybernetics inside, thinking he's sick. Back at the Tech Guru bunker, Moira tells Arnab everything, and though he would have called her crazy, he listened. She explains that he's going to be the man who saved the world from the mutants. At the end of it all, instead of running away, Arnab said okay. He makes a new arm for Moira, and once that's working, he asks her, do you think it's risky that we're going to be playing God? If he wants to go down that road, then the logic would apply that God created a species capable of making those leaps. The real risk is letting mutant kind go unchecked. They've already mastered resurrection. People think of them as gods, but they are devils. We now jump a millennium from now through time. We see the end of time, to the point where Moira says that the Phalanx were going to claim them. The time for ascendancy would arrive. She thought that he would want to know that the world is going to end tomorrow. We then see who Moira is talking about at this end of time, and Logan steps out of the brush telling her, I thought you were dead, but why? Why is all of this happening? She tells him the answer is her. She is why the world is ending, and she has been waiting a millennium for this moment, to kill the last mutant. And it is at that moment that she infected Wolverine, and he became the Omega Wolverine. And this is the end of one story, and the beginning of another. Back over in The Lives of Wolverine, issue number 4. With the many former lives that he has been jumping into to try and stop the death of Professor X, there is a time where Logan finds himself looking up at the eyes of Dr. Cornelius when he was in the Weapon X facility all those years ago. Cornelius tells him not to worry, he won't remember this. He won't remember as he continues to study the limits and the potential of his body. But Cornelius takes a blood sample, looking at it under a microscope, and notices something strange, like a sort of contagion or a parasite. Cornelius looks over, stating that before they root it out of him, they're going to run a few experiments to better understand the anomaly. He won't mind, will he? Of course not. At that exact moment, Wolverine jumps into the mind of his own former self. Wait, you need to listen. But at that moment, Omega Red takes control of Dr. Cornelius, beginning to activate the machine and electrocute Wolverine, telling him, whatever your plan was, I'm going to mess it all up. You can't send a weapon after me if a weapon doesn't exist! However, the parasite inside of Wolverine slowly begins to take hold and spread, covering his entire body in black. Omega Red, in control of this other body, looks down. What is this? Wolverine rips the tubes and wires connected to him away, slashing his way out as he sits up, possessed by Venom! Wolverine lunges off the operating table, and Omega Red grabs whatever machinery he can, throwing it to try and keep Wolverine away. But this is a pattern starting to be seen throughout all of Wolverine's past lives, a constant point. Anytime Omega Red would try to interfere, there was Wolverine or something close to stop him. Whether it during the events of Pearl Harbor, back in Colombia, or the Weapon X facility, there's no stopping Wolverine on whatever mission he is on. And in our current time, Jean is reaching out, pulling Wolverine back to his mind, stating that there's something wrong. She can't find the consciousness of Wolverine. Did she lose him in time? When Omega Red entered his consciousness, it's like somebody wrestled the wheel of the car away from her. They need to find Wolverine's brain. Professor X leans down to connect with Wolverine, asking if he's there. Can he hear him? And suddenly Wolverine grins, slamming his claws into Professor X's shoulder. Loud and clear. Greetings from Russia. I'm so glad that we're finally connected, Charles. Speaking through Wolverine is Mikhail Rasputin, smiling as he stands over Omega Red, controlling him in Russia. Now we go to the Deaths of Wolverine, issue number 4. As the Omega Wolverine story goes on, he explains how he came to this time period. After Moira infected him, she told him that she saved him over and over and that they were the ones who did this to her. That when they got what they wanted, they stripped her of her powers and exiled her. But he had a failsafe. With one single claw, he stabs into his left eye. Logan reaches in to pull out a small seed, dropping it into a small hole. After a few seconds, that seed sprouted, and Logan tells them, I'm not the praying type, but I'm putting this one out there for whoever and whatever might be listening. Let me fix this. Not for me, not even for mutant kind, but for life as we know it. Once Wolverine finishes his story, he and the others race to Arnab's bunker to try and stop Moira. But as they arrive, they find that Moira has already escaped. Wolverine grabs Arnab. "Where is she?" But he tells him that he doesn't know, so Wolverine throws him to the ground, not believing him. Arnab reaches for an energy blaster and shoots Wolverine, but before he can get the second shot off, Dakin and Gabby stop and restrain him. Laura looks at Wolverine hunched over, asking if he's okay. And Wolverine tells her, Yeah, I'll be fine." She wants to know then what happens when he's not okay. What if his healing factor can't keep up with the phalanx infection that is inside of him? Wolverine tells her, "You have to kill me before we kill Moira." He then turns, slamming Arnab into the wall, telling him, "I think I'm on the right side of history with this, but let me tell you about the future a bit. This is Dakin. He dies quickly in an energy blast from a sentinel. This is Gabby. She's depowered by Nimrod and ripped in half. This is Laura, Wolverine. She's tortured and experimented on for years as her organs and skin are harvested. This is my family. And it isn't just them who dies, it's all of the humans. They all get gobbled up in the end, Arnab, because of what Moira does later. Now, I can promise you, on the graves of my children, I won't kill you if you tell me where she went." Arnab is silent for a moment, but then he spills the beans. "Krakoa. She went to the island of the mutants." Wolverine looks at Arnab, shooting a claw into his nose. He screams for a moment, but then he stops. And Gabby asks, "I thought you weren't going to kill him." "He'll live. His knowledge won't. Now we'll need to destroy the lab, down to the last microprocessor." Meanwhile, over in the armory on Krakoa, Moira is sneaking in looking for the neutralizer gun that stole her powers, with hopes that it might be able to reverse the effects. If she can gain her powers again, she can die and redo all of this. She can be the one in charge of everything. Moira says that after all they have been through, all the mutants have done, she was like a cancer that they just had to cut out. And Professor X says that it wasn't his decision. They created a government, one that he believes in. His personal feelings don't outweigh the Council's wisdom. Her data was never stored in Cerebro. Her memory was never put into the cradles. This is it. This is her life. If she dies, it ends. He begs her to guard it more carefully. As a peace offering, he can offer her Krakoan medicine. Not only can she not be resurrected, but that gun? At that moment, Forge grabs her from behind, telling her that it won't work the way that she wants it to. It depowers. There are no reversals. He made sure of that. She pushes him off, shooting him with the gun, asking, "How does it feel to lose something that was central to you, huh? Soon you'll all know, because I'm gonna burn your island down and dance through the ashes." She puts on one of the suits of armor in the armory, and she grabs a hold of Destiny. "You had a rule. No precogs. It was a good rule. Just look at the mess that I've made of everything. Everyone's trying to blame me, but it isn't me, is it? Mystique was the blade, but I'm the hand that wielded it." And then with a flash of light over at the gate, Wolverine rushes out, slamming his claws through the armor and into Moira's stomach. She screams as she knocks him away, shooting him with the gun. And now without his healing factor, Wolverine's body begins to succumb to the phalanx infection, the virus within him that is making him half robot. He begins to rip away at his flesh, yelling to Destiny that she needs to get away, because he is, I am, we are phalanx. But back over in the Lives of Wolverine number 5. Professor X tries to keep his connection, looking for Wolverine throughout time and space, looking for his consciousness throughout all of his lives. But Omega Red, in the possession of Wolverine's body, the modern-day Wolverine, drives the claws in deeper. Jean tries to force Omega Red out, but she struggles from being choked, stating that the power on the other end of this, it's not just strong, it's unfixed. It keeps changing and rearranging itself throughout time. She doesn't know if she can hold on. Professor X says that he doesn't know how long he can hold on to this either. They've never fully understood what Mikkel was capable of, but we know this, that he is a reality breaker. Omega Red is here, Wolverine is gone, and somewhere in the wreckage, they need to find Logan. The real Logan, the modern day Logan. Over in the year of 1900 in northern Canada, Captain Xavier asks, wouldn't he reconsider with his exemplary service in the past few months, there's no doubt that he would be sworn in as a citizen of England. Logan steers the ship, telling him that he said it before. I will swear no allegiance, because I have no loyalty. Not to anyone. Xavier sighs, telling him he doesn't wish to pester. They drop the anchor, and Logan grabs his things. It's been fun, old man. Taught me a lot. Appreciate that. But my company is best suited for the woods. Xavier stops him, handing him his watch, telling him that he owes him something at least. It's a compass as well as a watch. So no matter how deep he travels into the wilderness, hopefully he'll never lose his way. And as Logan leaves, the Wolverine of that era ends up taking over. Meanwhile, back in the present, Omega Red struggles to remain in control of the modern-day Wolverine's body, with Mikkel asking what is going on, what is happening. Omega Red says that Wolverine is clawing his way back. He's carving me out of his mind! With one final push, Wolverine gasps for air as he forces Omega Red out of his mind, throwing off the helmet. Jean hugs him, and Wolverine laughs. Jeannie, Chuck, when I was bullied out of my head, I managed to get a glimpse into Omega Red's. He knows where we are, and how to end this. Back in Russia, Omega Red pulls the Cerebro sword out of his chest to sever his connection to Wolverine, and he sits up asking Mikkel if he's alright. Mikkel simply tells him that he failed. Nothing will ever be alright. Over and over, despite all the time in the world, all the opportunities provided. You have failed Russia, Omega Red! Omega Red yells, no! We were in this together! Send me back further! I'll go 500 years back, 1,000 years back! And Mikkel tries to pry the sword away from Omega Red. Omega Red pushes him away, and Mikkel says that this is not a democracy. You don't have a voice. You are a tool, a failed one at that. You didn't even realize what's coming. He is coming. He wants his revenge. Omega Red begins to panic, and then as he looks at the sword, a gateway begins to open, and out of it steps Wolverine. Omega Red looks at him. Just you? Just me. No more tricks, no more dodges, no more bullshit! The two begin to run at each other, exchanging blow after blow, but never stopping to feel the hurt that they were inflicting. Whether it be in the past, the present, or the future, there is one constant between their battles. Wolverine has always come out on top. The two tear and rip at each other until Wolverine gets that one clean swipe, cutting off one of Omega Red's hands. Omega Red screams, wrapping a tentacle around a tree, ripping it off, slamming it onto Wolverine, pinning him to the ground. He then grabs a hold of the sword, beginning to walk over, and seeing this, Wolverine hacks away at the tree trunk. Once it finally breaks free, Wolverine throws himself upwards to feel the sword stab into his neck. He falls limp for only a moment before he laughs. Omega Red looks over to see Wolverine's arm thrusting through the opening in his chest where the sword once was. He then buries his other arm inside, and with all of his strength, he pulls them apart, ripping Omega Red's body in half. He looks down at the two halves, making sure that neither are moving before finally pulling the sword out of his neck, and then falling to his knees. Later on Krakoa, he shuffles into the point and tells Sage that he figured he best get this to her before he falls over to take a year-long nap, and he falls into a chair. Sage takes the sword, telling him that she's sorry, but he can't rest yet. The island? It's under attack. Wolverine looks up with his only good eye, asking, what? By who? Well, by you, actually, Wolverine. Now for the conclusion, with the deaths of Wolverine number 5. Somewhere in the mind of Professor X, he sits on a bench enjoying a peaceful life around him, when suddenly the birds around him fly off in a panic and he looks up to see a woman coming at him. Moira is holding her stomach. Screw you and your dream. I wish I'd never met you, you coward, you traitor! I won't let you win. I won't. I can't. Die. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Omega Wolverine tries to run and get away, and Sage radios in asking if anyone has eyes on him. Laura, Gabby, and Dakin are all chasing the Omega, with Laura stating, did you mean to say Wolverine or Wolverines? And Gabby tells her, we're all Wolverines, including the Omega. Sage asks where are they, and Laura says that they are 3 clicks south by southwest of the Blossom Bogs. Heading due north, it's like he knows where he's going. Sage quietly says the cradle. He's heading to the cradle. The phalanx is an intelligence, but it's also a contagion. A contagion's purpose is to spread and further its corruption. Cerebro is a port, an access point from their biotech network, and this is the phalanx's best chance to upload its living malware. And wait, where are you going? Sage gets up, walking over to the Cerebro sword. But back in the forest, Laura lunges in for an attack, tearing away more of Wolverine's flesh. but he spins back, stabbing her in the chest. "We are Phalanx! I'm sorry!" Basically, at this point, he is nothing more than an adamantium skeleton in circuitry. And Dakin throws himself into the fight, punching. But even his hand breaks on the metal rib cage. Wolverine attacks him. "Stop me! We are Phalanx! Stop me, Dakin!" Dakin is knocked down, and Gabby asks why work harder and not smarter? Up above, she pushes off a large boulder, but before it can land, Wolverine cuts it in half. Gabby jumps down, but she too is easily swatted away by this monstrosity that was Wolverine. But then somebody calls out, "Hey bub, why don't you pick on someone your own size?" And Logan from the current time period, now back in his right body, steps out. He pulls out a small compass with a watch inside and shows it, asking the Omega, "Do you recognize me? Do you recognize this? Somebody gave it to me, to us, a long time ago, so that we would never lose our way. Might be broken, but you know what it tells me? Your time is up." Logan charges in with his claws ready as Omega Red shouts, "This is the time of Phalanx! As soon as we port into Cerebro, we will be Phalanx! All will be Phalanx!" As the two begin to fight, claw against claw, Logan tells the others to stay back. They've sacrificed enough for him. "This wasn't your job to suffer for whatever wrongs I've committed. Not now, not ever." The Omega begins to overpower Logan, but out of the woods, Sage runs out with her sword, but gets knocked down before she has a chance to even swing it. Logan quickly gets back up, grabbing at the handle, but he slams the sword down through the adamantium ribs of the Omega, pinning him there. There's a bright green light followed by a loud shoom as it explodes, sending everyone flying back. And as the dust settles, all that's left is a skeleton scrubbed clean of its circuitry. Sage's counter-programming burned out all traces of Phalanx, and the island took care of the rest, absorbing the nightmare version of Wolverine. And it was over. Later in a Krakoan bar, Jean says the timeline's still here. Krakoa's still here, they are still here, and Professor X says that he'll drink to that. "No, this ain't about celebrating. It's about surviving." The others ask him why is he always so grumpy. They won. And Logan says, "Only for now, kid. When you live as long as I have, you know that there's always more mayhem waiting around the next bend of the trail." And as the mutants enjoy their peace that they fought so hard for, Moira had one last trick up her sleeve. Because if she died here, she would be born again. This time, online. But in her 11th life, there's no question as to her imagination. She is more than a body now, she is an intelligence. Deep from within a shallow grave, a hand reaches out of the dirt, pushing away as a mechanical form crawls out. She's still here, and she's hoping that they're all looking forward to Moira's swan song. And there you have it, the Lives and the Deaths of Wolverine event that happened recently. 10 issues with a very confusing way to read it. It literally went Lives of Wolverine 1, Deaths of Wolverine 1, Lives 2, Deaths 2, and I'm pretty sure I mixed them up in the middle right there, but the story came out the way it needed to. Hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Join us over at Patreon for early access, and I'll see you next time right here at Comicstorian.